Hey listeners, this is Chuck with Private Family Banking. Glad to be here with you today. It's a chilly day here in South Texas. You can see the pool behind me is covered up for the winter, but you know what's not covered up? The economy moving ahead. Now's the time to establish your private family banking platform, because with that platform, truly designed for success, we can work together. We can take the money you have, the money you're going to have. We can leverage savings that you have, whether that's tied up in a qualified government plan like a 401k, 403b, or IRAs. We can even do Roth work with your Roth. We're going to take that money and we're going to help you actually multiply it in a safe way, in a safe money system. We're going to protect your money now. We're going to do it with a private family banking platform. And so you are set up for success and the opportunities moving forward. Don't delay. Send me an email, chuck@privatefamilybanking.com. We'll get a schedule together, or just click the link below and get on my calendar. We'll do a 30-minute free discovery call where we'll go through where you are, where you want to be. If you have consumer debt, car loans, we can help accelerate those payoff plans using a very custom-designed accelerated debt payoff plan. If you're more capitalized, you've got money in 401k, 403bs, IRAs, we can leverage that. If you're a saver and you just have cash stowed away, we're going to make your cash work for you all the time, uninterrupted compound interest for the rest of your life. It's legacy planning. It's putting post-mill talk into post-mill action. Get a hold of me today, chuck@privatefamilybanking.com, or schedule a meeting using the link below. See you soon. God bless.
There's a shift happening. Incoming Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth talking about New St. Andrews College. Let's talk to President Ben Merkle about it. Here we go.
Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Christ the highest heaven adored, Christ the everlasting Lord. Late in time, behold him come, offspring of a virgin's womb. Veiled in flesh, the Godhead see, hail the incarnate deity. Pleased is man with man to dwell, Jesus our Emmanuel. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King.
All right. Yeah. Welcome to a special Christmas episode of the Dead Men Walking podcast. Guys, being released on Christmas Day, recorded with President Ben Merkle of New St. Andrews College a few days early, but it's getting released on Christmas because every Wednesday you get a new episode here at Dead Men Walking Podcast, and this year Christmas is on Wednesday. So welcome. Got my hat on. A Merry Christmas to all of you if you happen to be listening on Christmas. I hope you're spending some time with family as well too, not just listening to podcasts, but we appreciate it if you're here. We appreciate you guys checking out DMWpodcast.com to find out more about us, supporting us through the merch store, and telling a friend, obviously, resharing us on social medias everywhere. Social media. I guess I have socials and social media kind of mixed up there, but guys, we appreciate it. This show couldn't be brought to you unless we had great sponsors, and we do. And I have two guys in the financial industry that I want to talk to you about. They do different things, but they're both equally phenomenal. Dominion Wealth Strategists, the only distinctly reformed financial company, full service financial planning and wealth management. I mean, these guys will do your debt management, savings, life and health insurance, retirement planning, estate planning, business services, you name it. They got you under control. They want to help you grow your wealth. All of Christ for all of life, all of finance for all of Christendom. So make sure you check out Dominion Wealth Strategists. You can click on the link below. And of course, Private Family Banking. Chuck, a good friend of ours, he is saying it's time to leverage the MAGA economy. He wants you to help protect that wealth, grow it, and he's going to give you different ways to do that as well. If you have a small business, gets even better. He can help you with stock market stuff, buying gold, Bitcoin, all that stuff, but he does it in a very uniquely way through an insurance program that can help you in the parallel economy. So click on the link below and go visit Chuck there at Private Family Banking. And of course, our friend of the podcast, Andrew Rappaport, has a book out. What do we believe? What do we believe? This is a great stocking stuffer. This is a great gift. It's great for you just to read. Right now, free shipping for all Dead Men Walking listeners. It's a $15 book. It's a gorgeous book, and it's got lots of good content in there. Great to give to maybe that new Christian, maybe an unbelieving friend, maybe even someone who wants to explore the theological and doctrinal underpinnings of our faith. What do we believe? Click on the link below, and you will get free shipping on that. So $15 out the door for a great book by Andrew Rappaport over there at Striving for Eternity Ministries. So, guys, had a great discussion with President Ben Merkle of the New St. Andrews College. We want to talk to him about just how they have kind of skyrocketed in the national conversation after video clips have been circulating of Trump nominee Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, basically went on a podcast and they said, "Where are you sending your kids to school?" And he said, "Well, there's only one of three in the whole nation, and one of those was New St. Andrews College." So you've really seen in the last 5, 6, 7 years how NSA, and that's not the governmental agency, and we made a joke about that on the podcast. Excuse me. But NSA, New St. Andrews, has really stayed true to what they believe and what they teach and who they are, and have gained in popularity to where we now are talking about them on the national stage. So we had the president of NSA come in, talk to Ben. He's been on the podcast, I think, twice before over the last 4 years. We like to, every year and a half or so, have him back on and just kind of give us the, the lowdown on the culture, on post-secondary education, on what they're doing out there at NSA. It was very good conversation because we're seeing this cultural shift right now, guys, of going away from these large liberal universities to even employers wanting students and workers that have attended these smaller conservative schools. And we talked about that on the podcast. He had a very interesting take on that, but also discuss like how he's handling his growth. They've actually, for the next 3 or 4 years, he said, limited the incoming freshman class because there's so many people that are applying and wanting to go to NSA. But it was very interesting. He talked about Pete a little bit, how he knows him, why he was mentioned nationally, what they're doing at the school. We talked about, obviously, the importance of post-secondary education, if it's right for you, and what should be taught at those institutions. All around, it was a great episode. And guys, we appreciate you clicking on this and listening to this, even if it's after Christmas. I know it's being released on the 25th, but I'm wishing all of my listeners a Merry Christmas. This is a joyous season. Why is it joyous? Because this is the redemptive work of God come to fruition in the birth of our Savior. And this is the time of year we celebrate it. This is the good news. This is the man God that was born of a virgin, that even the wisest of the men in the land came to worship him and said, something has shifted in reality. We know that this is the coming Messiah. So with that, this is a joyous occasion and joyous season. I hope you enjoy it with your family, friends, and give glory to God in everything you do, and especially during this time. So the next thing you will hear is me and President Ben Merkle talking about NSA. Here we go. So Ben Merkle, President Ben Merkle, are we allowed to call you Prez on the podcast?
You can do that.
Been on
You can do that.
All right, we got the Prez with us. Well, hey, Merry Christmas. If you're listening to this or watching this right now, of course, we're recording a few days early, but we wish you all a Merry Christmas. We're allowed to say that now, I think, in this country. We're always allowed to, and I really don't care. But Ben, thanks for being on the podcast again, man.
Pleasure to be here. Very much a privilege. Thank you.
And I'm sure you're a busy man, so we'll get right into it. But for those who may not know you, for all the new listeners, we're always growing and gaining new listeners and that kind of thing. And you've been on the podcast before. I think it's been about a year or so. We like to have our annual Ben Merkle episode just to keep us up to date and on the thumb of the social and cultural things going on, especially in post-secondary education. Give us like a little short bio of who you are and what you've been up to.
So I'm Ben Merkle. I'm president of New St. Andrews. I've been in this role for, I think, 9 years now, but I've been teaching at NSA in one way or another since, I think, around 99. I've bounced back and forth between working here at New St. Andrews, and then also I've been a minister at Christ Church, kind of across the street, and I still preach at our downtown service about 40% of the Sundays. So my wife, Becca Merkle, and myself have 5 kids, 2 grandkids, 2 more on the way. And I'm blessed to be a part of the ministry here in Moscow.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of those 2 things, I wanted to get your reaction to this because I've had So obviously, Doug Wilson and the Moscow guys, he's been ministering as a pastor for, I think 40 years, just kind of pushing the plow. You've been in some type of either ministry or, like you said, position at New St. Andrews College. So long for many, many years. So long time coming, all this kind of work and plowing the ground. And then all of a sudden in the last year, I've had so many people come up to me and they go, who's this? What's this New St. Andrews College? What's this Doug Wilson? He's on Tucker. We've got, which we're going to talk about. We've got a Trump nominee for Secretary of Defense talking about there's only 3 schools he would send his kids to, one of them being New St. Andrews College. And now all of a sudden it seems like, who are these guys that are getting popular all of a sudden? And I go, all of a sudden, this has been a long time coming. They have been tilling the ground and laying this foundation out in Moscow and the surrounding area for quite a while. I always chuckle to myself. I've only been on the bandwagon for, 7 or 8 years, which pales in comparison to, like I said, decades of work you guys have both been doing. But then to have a lot of people go, it's kind of when a comic bursts on the scene or an actor and they go, oh, this new thing. And they go, oh no, they've been chugging along for years and years. What's your response to that? If you've had that at all, because I know I've had it to where, you kind of got this newfound popularity and they think you just sprung up out of nowhere when in fact you've been doing the work for quite a while. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think you describe it exactly right. Like, I mean, this is just the work we've been doing for as long as I've been here. We're just plodding away. I look at Doug. Doug is particularly seems to be kind of a newfound level of national recognition, which is really funny. And I'm blessed. I did mention this earlier. Doug is my father-in-law. So my wife, Becca, is Doug's oldest daughter. So I've known Doug quite well for a long time. And he's just the same Doug as always. Same, he's a plotter. He even, that word works into the title of his book and one of his podcasts. He's a plotter. And he's still just a plotter. He's very much a homebody. He hates to travel, and he's happiest when he's preaching, counseling members of the congregation, or writing. I mean, he's not really looking for some big limelight. But I do think that we're in an interesting moment. There's such a pivot that's going on nationally, where a lot of people are looking for new voices, new answers to questions that are no longer being answered elsewhere. And I think that a lot of the work that Doug has done in Moscow over the years has formed a foundation of a very compelling answer to a lot of those questions. But it is really remarkable. Moscow, this is just a small little town. It would be just a little farm town, except we have the University of Idaho here, so that makes it a little bit different. But it's still a teeny little town, 25,000. My house, I can walk to my house about 5 minutes. I'm just a few blocks up the hill here, and life here is the same as always. And I think so. There's all this stuff going on globally, or nationally, I should say, that kind of recognizing what's going on here. But if you're here in Moscow, you don't notice, especially if you don't live on certain social media channels and whatnot. You don't notice. And so for most people in Moscow, I don't think there's almost any recognition that all of this is happening. The nature of my job, I travel quite a lot, so I get to go out and see. And I would definitely say, like, over the last 4 years, there's been just a massive change in, people recognizing you in airports, and people like the reception is very different now than it used to be. So I think I see that, but I think most people in Moscow would not see it because they're not out and they're not listening to that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I should say too, because you won't kind of brag on yourself, but I'll say, we weren't just talking about Doug here. I'm talking about you too, as president of NSA, sticking to a very specific kind of message and goal over the last 4 or 5 years. You guys have had some videos that come out that garner tens of millions of views, that shine the light on NSA, that really have a talking point or an ideal that you don't vary from. So to say, you're popular. I'm saying you've been doing something yourself at NSA for quite some time, half a decade or more, of really trying to get the messaging out on what a liberal arts college can be. And what's interesting to me is I'm 43. And I grew up in the 80s and 90s, graduated in 99, and it was all about post-secondary education. Just go get a 4-year. That's all you need. You'll get hired. I mean, we didn't even really have any look to what the degree should be. It's just get into college. I mean, that was what's preached us to the counselors and things like that. Just go to college for something. That piece of paper is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
And now for the first time in my lifetime, and I'm very happy to say for Gen Z and even Gen Alpha coming up, we're seeing a shift of, wait a minute, if I'm going to spend my time and money in post-secondary education, boy, I want to make sure that it has the set of ideals and values and benefit and value that I can get from it. And NSA is kind of rising to the top in that shift. And I found it pretty awesome when I saw Pete Hegseth talking about on a podcast that, tens of millions of views to this day, and saying, they said, oh, I'd only send my kids 3 or 4 different schools. And he mentions NSA in there. Now, I don't know your connection to him or if you have one, but I just found it astounding. I went, here's this relatively smaller attended school out in the Moscow area, in Idaho area, and now it's being talked about on a national level just because they've been consistent in what their messaging is, what their ideals are, and now a shift away from this kind of woke, liberal, useless type of education. I use that term loosely. Maybe you would agree or disagree. And I'm not calling all schools that, or colleges that. And now going to, where can we get the most bang for our buck? Where can our kids learn something that's going to be valuable for them? And we've got a possibly Secretary of Defense saying, oh, NSA is one of those schools out of the thousands. What are your thoughts on that? What's the feedback, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, your description of that 80s, 90s conviction that we all had of, like, you just need a college degree. That was, I think, in the world of logical fallacies, I think that was a post hoc fallacy. What the post hoc ergo propter hoc, after this, therefore, because of this. What they did was they saw people who had a college degree consistently earning at a certain level and distinguishing themselves in a certain way. And so they said, okay, well, so apparently a college degree gives you a good job, gives you a good salary. And then they tell everybody, so you need to get a college degree if you want to get a good job. That's post hoc, meaning you're saying, well, all you need to do is get that degree, that piece of paper, and you automatically get these kinds of jobs. Well, no, there was a very particular education that set certain people apart, and certain successes in life come as a result of that certain kind of education. They attach the meaning to simply that slip of paper. And what's happened over the last 40 years is what used to be a vibrant, robust education that really did something to you has been slowly replaced with a bunch of box ticking and virtue signaling, and then a piece of paper. And then we go, oh, I got a college degree, so I'll have all the blessings that they used to get in the 80s and 90s with this piece of paper. Well, no, you need to go back and get that actual education if you want those kinds of blessings. And that's not what is being given anymore. And I think more and more people are starting to open their eyes to see how that's happened. Pete Hegseth is an interesting guy. A few years ago, I think if you've been following his testimony and everything, I think he had a radical transformation of his life. And I think it was a meaningful conversion to Christ that has really transformed who he is. And as a part of that, he ended up putting his kids in a classical Christian school. And so he kind of became aware of classical Christian education through this school that he put his kids in. And then was very struck by the uniqueness of something really distinctive that was happening there. And he started diving into it. He forms a bit of a friendship with David Goodwin, who's the president of the Association of Classical Christian Schools. And then the two of them wrote a book together on their it's Battle for the American Mind, I believe is the name of it, on basically what Pete was seeing and what the questions that Pete had that David was answering. That becomes that book. And then that became Fox and Friends. I don't know the various brands here. I think it was Fox and Friends. They did like a 4 or 5 hour special on this. And then I was invited to go as a speaker to that. So I did an interview with Hegseth through that. So that's where I met him, and he became aware of NSA through that. I've bumped into him since then, and we've had some exchanges. He mentioned, I think his wife was listening to some of my wife's stuff or something like that. So anyhow, we've had a few a couple encounters. I wouldn't say he would be able to pick me out of a crowd or anything like that, but I think it's more as he's seen what classical education has done and seeing how distinct that was from me. He has his own experience with, the Ivy League and his own disappointment with that world. And then he's seeing something really distinctive happening, and he sees NSA as, at the college level, the version of the alternative to what everybody else is going to.
Yeah. So for those who are listening that might not know, can you kind of quickly define classical education for us, and then how it has a relationship with a college and university such as NSA?
Sure. Yeah. So, I would, first of all, I would want to be sure to say classical Christian education. I think,
Sure.
if I could, I would say Christian classical, but for some reason that doesn't roll off the tongue like that. But I think it's really important that we say, I have an obligation to give my children a Christian education. And I think the classical method is the best way of delivering that Christian education. Classical education was, it's interesting. So I'm sitting here in Moscow, and 1981, I think, is the year my father-in-law Doug is looking to start a school for my now wife Rebecca, his oldest daughter. So he starts Logos School. When he did it, there was an essay that Dorothy Sayers once wrote called "The Lost Tools of Learning," where she looks at basically the medieval tradition up through what really was the English classical education that they all received. She's drawing lessons from that world, and her father was the headmaster for the Christ Church boarding school, which is across the street from Christ Church College. Christ Church was my college when I was at Oxford, so I studied at Oxford. There's a little school like directly across the street. Her dad ran that, so she grew up in this world of looking at the K-12 education and what works, what doesn't. So she makes these observations about the medieval trivium, and she has this kind of experiment in her mind about taking that trivium and making it into 3 stages of learning. My father-in-law reads that essay and decides, okay, I'm going to try it. So he starts Logos School, and it's built on this idea of taking the trivium and applying it as 3 stages of learning. It's an experiment, and I think Sayers says, I don't know if anybody will ever try this. And so he tries it. And it was fantastic. It's just a really impressive way of working through these stages of learning, but also in it is a return to the classical texts. This idea that there are great books that have been have been used to shape the mind over the years and give a disproportionate benefit if you're spending time in them. So it was this idea of building this education that's distinctively Christian with a unique Christian worldview, moving through the stages of the trivium and using these classical texts. And that just took off. It spread like wildfire across the U.S. The ACCS, the Association of Classical Christian Schools, was formed out of that, and a number of other things. So that's like this K-12 movement. And then it's jumped into the homeschooling world with things like Classical Conversations. So now you got hundreds of thousands of kids that are getting an education like this. Well, if you go back to, I said in 81 was when Logos was started. Well, 1994 would be the year my wife graduated from high school, and that fall is the founding of New St. Andrews College, conveniently. So the idea was basically this college is the next step for that education. So we are a distinctively liberal arts college with a very distinctive and committed Christian worldview. And it's just different than what I see almost all colleges doing these days.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I read an article about 6 months ago, and I was in the corporate world for a while, and was in charge of hiring and firing and things like that, as a territory manager. And we always looked at post-secondary education, and sometimes you would get a bump just by maybe having a well heard of name on the resume from a university or college. And I read an article saying that a lot of employers now in the last couple of years are shying away from the more liberal universities, and they are looking at and giving more benefit to possible employers that are at smaller conservative colleges and universities. One of them referenced was Hillsdale out here in Michigan, where I'm at, which seems to produce these college graduates that go on to do some crazy great things. Their alumni list is pretty phenomenal. NSA is kind of in that same group as well too. I don't know if you want to put the conservative label, but I'm saying not the kind of woke university that kind of puts out some of the the trash politics that these professors are just laying on these young students. So now we see a shift away from even corporations, small businesses, medium-sized businesses going, hold on, we see a benefit in hiring from a pool of candidates that have gone to smaller, more conservative, more classical type universities. Why do you think you see that, one? And then two, are you looking for a certain type of applicant at NSA? Are you looking for someone who has been maybe charter school, private school, homeschool, or you go, no, we can work with public school as well too? What's the litmus test there to where,
Yeah.
colleges like you guys are producing these phenomenal, young men and women?
Yeah. I mean, so the first half of that question, yeah, I think there's a massive shift. I think that think of it as kind of the Bud Light effect, where what happened to Bud Light, I think, is that happened to our Ivy League colleges, especially last year with a lot of the protests on campuses and the inability for the administration to deal with those sort of things, or to speak clearly about some questions that should be kind of easy to answer. And I think we see that, and the thought of having young workers who have been mentored by that worldview come in and take over your business, and the entitlement that comes with these people, the worldview that they're bringing in, and you just think, I can't make money with those kinds of employees. And I think that so I think that there's an opening of the eyes to a lot of that. And yeah, I have increasingly heard those Ivy League degrees on your resume are increasingly a detriment, not an advantage, and that's really striking, interesting. As to what NSA is looking for, I would say, we're there. You can go about admissions and selectivity in two different ways. One is, you try to get as many people in as you can, and then you try to work through to find the people that match exactly what you're looking for. We're a little bit different in that I've found it to be really helpful for us to just be as distinctively clear with our branding and messaging, and even like pushing the envelope a little bit. I mean,
Right.
I don't think that I'm exaggerating when I say I think that we can offend some people that are listening to our marketing and whatnot. So we give a very distinctive brand, and there's something really self-selecting about that. So I don't have I'm looking for the kid who comes from a private classical Christian school. I don't want a public school kid. No, I'm not thinking that way. I'm thinking, if you're a sharp kid and you say, I look at New St. Andrews and I say, I want to be that, then I say, come on in. So we're looking for people who are interested in doing what we're doing. And yeah, they tend to come from a certain, our pipeline is strong on certain little funnels inside the classical Christian education world. We're going to be really strong there, but we get kids that come from public schools. We get kids that come from overseas. We get kids that come from everywhere. And I like the variety, keeping things a little bit exciting, throwing something new in the mix. As long as they say, yeah, I want to do what you're doing, and I'm anxious for that, then I think we want them.
Yeah, I like that. Just being clear and open about your message and what you believe kind of does, I would assume. Yeah, like you said, create a kind of self-selecting group of, I want to attend there. Yeah, we have in our church, we have a student that's at NSA. He's a good friend of mine. Actually, I was just at his house a few days ago for psalms and hymns and cigars. And probably one of the most well-read young men that I know. And I just go, man, it just seems like you get a certain type of, okay, let's go. Let's educate myself. How do we build this? What are we doing? Let's get it done attitude in some of these colleges and universities such as NSA. And like I even mentioned before, Hillsdale and some other ones around the country. And
there's something good about being, I like being a school where there's a little bit of risk coming here, like it doesn't, NSA doesn't portray itself or look like, it doesn't present as your typical college experience. And I think a student who says, an 18-year-old, I think 18-year-olds are some of the, I mean this in a endearing sort of way, but 18-year-olds can be some of your most insecure people in the world in terms of making a risk with their identity. And your college undergraduate degree becomes an essential part of your identity. I mean, we all identify ourselves by, like if you're saying, tell me about yourself, your college undergraduate degree is frequently in that like top 5 items in your bio. It's how you identify yourself. And for an 18-year-old, when they make that selection about the college, they're making a really formative decision about their identity. So when you have somebody who says, you know what, I would like to do something a little bit bold, a little bit risky, a little bit daring, then you've self-selected a crowd of people who I think are going to make a disproportionate impact later on in life. They're people who are ready to start something, do something, be a little bit imaginative. They're not people who necessarily need everything laid out for them. And I think that that's healthy. Like there's something about becoming more well-known or more well-established that I'm not sure I want that. I want to keep that little bit of risk in it.
It's funny because I was just going to ask that because, NSA, a little counterculture, you would say, right? And then counterculture for a long time. And now the pendulum has swung so far on the left and woke and censorship and all this that you're starting to see counterculture become more popular. I mean, we've got Russell Brand reading Joe Boot, for crying out loud, and you've got comics in that world pushing back on woke and going, well, what is this Jesus thing? Or what is this theology thing? Or, and it's this really weird time where I say weird, but I think it's a pattern. When you go too far into depravity, it's like truth starts to seem real popular, real good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's always been that way, even throughout the church, where we've seen, martyrdom and things like that, where you see pressure on the church or anything like that. And that's where the Lord refines us. COVID, we saw that, right? Do all these things, and you saw this remnant of going, no, we're not. And those churches grew by leaps and bounds. So I wonder if you are a little worried about that when you go, well, we've got this thing over here. People start to recognize it and go, hey, we want to be part of this movement of truth and righteousness and justice and all the things that the culture is really not right now. But then you start to see that grow. And it's like, where's that equilibrium to where then, the counterculture starts to become the culture. I think we want that ultimately. If you and I are being honest, we want to see, God glorified in our culture broadly.
Yeah.
But then it's like you kind of lose some of that alternativeness. Is that something you truly think about?
Oh, yeah. It's something like I think about that just nonstop. Like that is the thing, because so in my mind, I think one of the things that the Christian church needs to learn, and I talk about this a lot, is we need to learn how to build and hold on to institutions. We have deep in our DNA, we are terrified of institutions because in our mind, an institution is what always becomes liberal. You build something and then it becomes liberal. And that's not just that's not an imaginary thing. I'm looking at countless schools that I've seen just in the lifetime of my own professional career. I've seen classical schools who were built by faithful people and then have gone in this direction where it's like, you're an embarrassment. Like, you don't have any of your biblical convictions anymore. You don't have any of your spine. I see that again and again. So it's a real, true fear, but it's not something I'm ready to roll over for. I believe that we have to actually figure out, it's a challenge that we need to solve. We need to conquer this, because if you look at the history of the church, the Christian church has held on to institutions for a long time in the past. This is the oddity. This is not the norm, that we lose everything inside of 10 years. We ought to be able to build and hold on to it. And so I'm convinced that the evangelical leadership needs to learn the art of administering faithfully, such that you can hold something against all of these forces in a faithful direction long term. And that's one of the things that I feel daily in my role here. I'm always sniffing for, like, what's the thing that is trying to sneak in to make us lose our conviction, and what do I need to do to make this the kind of place that's going to hold on to it and actually be a legacy that can be passed on. I think that is the question that we need to be learning to answer.
That is good, and how we allowed this too. Sometimes you have to look back and go, well, how did this change so we can guard against that in the future? You think of you mentioned Oxford, Yale, Harvard; those were all Christian institutions. I mean, the
Yep.
scientific method, the Renaissance came out of Christianity. I mean, you look back at some of the most notable physicists, scientists, literature. You go down the line, and they are theologians, really, is what they are. Many saying,
Yeah.
I'm doing this work unto the glory of God. So like you said, it's been the mainstay that we own those institutions as
Yeah.
believers. And now only in the last 100 years or so have we said, oh, well, we've given it up to the left or liberals, or however you want to,
Yeah.
secularists, however you want to define them. So I would wonder, how did we let that happen? Even like you said, the idea of things going progressive. I have a whole generation of Christians that just believe if a denomination gets large enough, it just goes woke, just goes
Exactly.
liberal. That's just what happens. Oh,
Yeah.
well, we can't do much about the PCUSA, or, watch
Yeah.
out for the SBC. They're going to be there next. And you go,
And,
well,
and
why are
it's
we
even
just
like if
assuming
you
that?
build a church building, people are scared to build a building because they believe that will be the downfall of the church, which is really sad. That's why all of our churches look like garbage, because we don't have this like legacy mindset, this long-term generational expectation of the faithfulness. And I think that and I don't think that. I think it's a real concern, because I'm looking at what the life of NSA, and we have been this obscure, rowdy little small school that's now starting to come into its own. And I would say it turns out, like, I always, early on, I thought this is the hard part, and then we get to that size, that becomes easier, and it's like, no, this is the easy part. You get that size,
Right.
that's when it becomes a lot harder, because that's when you start to face all of these various pressures.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's bookend this. Can you throw out, we'll link everything up below for those listening or watching. Throw out anything you got to promote, or where they can find NSA, or where they can find you if you want them to follow you on socials.
Yeah, definitely nsa.edu. Go to the webpage, especially to the blog. If you look at our YouTube channel, I would especially encourage you to go to the YouTube channel for New St. Andrews and to subscribe there. We've got a lot of really good content coming out. And then I'm on Twitter, and I can never remember. I think it's President NSA is my handle. So if you want to follow me there.
Yeah, NSA too. I always laugh. President of the NSA, you go, man, this guy work for the government, or what's going on there?
I
Afraid to
had a
click on
baseball
his
hat
link.
that said NSA on it, and I remember I was wearing it in Washington D.C. when I was there. I'm getting all these weird looks, and I suddenly realized I think this has a different meaning here than
Meaning
at
down
home.
here.
And I
Yeah.
think that people generally don't advertise it here if you are connected to the NSA.
Right.
You're not supposed to
Yeah.
brand it.
This guy's really on the nose here as he's walking around DC with an NSA hat
Yeah.
on. That's great. All right. Before we go, really quick, what's on the horizon for NSA? Can you give us anything? What you got? Marketing stuff coming up? You adding new classes? I mean, what do you got coming in for 2025?
Yeah, well, probably the biggest thing is that we're launching an MDiv. I'm really excited to see a master's program for training pastors. For years, Christ Church has had the Greyfriars. I was a Greyfriar, which was the ministerial training program that Christ Church had. That program, we've done it kind of hybrid with NSA before, but now NSA is formally taking over it, and it will be an MDiv. So that's probably our biggest thing. I would say, we're really trying to turn it on the media front. So especially that YouTube channel, I'd be watching that. We have some really fun podcasts that are coming out of there. We're right now, I put a pause on our growth for our freshman class. I've capped the current incoming freshman class, and we're going to hold that for 4 or 5 years, because we've doubled the undergrad in the last 4 years, and everybody's a little bit exhausted. So we got to catch up with our facilities and finances and all of that. So we're just pacing ourselves, but God's been very good to us, and we're trying to be responsible with it.
One last question, because this is gonna this affects me personally, but just in case there's listeners out there too, I've got a sophomore in high school, 8th grader. So we're going to be having discussions in the future, probably with your admissions office pretty soon. When should parents start looking at post-secondary if they have children that are getting close to that age? Is that it's the senior year we should start? Is that something they should prep a couple years before? What are your thoughts on that?
I would say I think you definitely want your applications in December of your senior year. So I think your junior year, you want to I really recommend travel and visit college campuses.
Colleges,
Don't
yeah.
sign up for something you haven't gone to see, and walk around and ask yourself, is this who I want to be? Is this what I want to become? Is this what I want to be like? Because this really is going to have a disproportionate impact on who you are. So I would be sure to visit and your spring of your junior year, fall of your senior year, and then have your application in December. For us, I tend to see our December applications are always our strongest ones. We'll still accept people after that, but they tend to be kind of they're kind of afterthoughts. It seems like, and so I think you want to be in that first batch. Also, I would say if you're looking for financial aid, that's usually attached to people that are accepted in that first batch in December. Somebody that gets accepted like in May, they might still get accepted, but I doubt there's any financial aid for them at most schools.
Yeah, perfect. All right. President Ben Merkle of New St. Andrews College, thank you so much for coming on. We always appreciate you taking time.
Thanks for having me. Privilege.
Awesome. Guys, remember, you can find out more about Dead Men Walking Podcast at dmwpodcast.com. We wish you a Merry Christmas if you're listening to us on Christmas Day. We appreciate that, but hey, it's available as soon as it posts. So if you have to catch up after Christmas, we totally understand. Remember, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. God bless. Be sure to check us out at dmwpodcast.com, where you can purchase the best and snarkiest merch on the internet, support the show, and leave us a review or message. Dead Men Walking can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Dead Men Walking Podcast, and on Twitter X at Real DMW Podcast. The Dead Men Walking Podcast is part of the Fight Laugh Feast Network. For exclusive show content, be sure to download the Pub TV app and become a member. If you're a business that needs to reach hundreds of thousands of potential customers in your demographic, podcast advertising might be for you. Send all inquiries to deadmenwalkingpodcast@gmail.com.
None your biscuits.